The book of Nehemiah, chapter 4. When Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, the Ammonites, and the Ashdodites heard that the restoration of the walls of Jerusalem was progressing, for the gaps were beginning to be closed, they became extremely angry. They all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to throw us into confusion. We prayed to our God and posted a watch against them day and night for fear of what they might do. Meanwhile, the Judahites were saying, "Slackened is the bearer's strength. There is no end to the rubbish. Never will we be able to rebuild the wall." Our enemies thought, before they are aware of it or see us, we will come into their midst, kill them, and put an end to the work. When the Jews who lived near them had come to us from one place after another, and had told us 10 times over that they were about to attack us, I stationed guards down below behind the wall, near the exposed points, assigning them by family groups with their swords, spears, and bows. I made an inspection, then addressed these words to the nobles, the magistrates, and the rest of the people. Do not fear them. Keep in mind the Lord, who is great and to be feared, and fight for your kindred, your sons and your daughters, your wives, and your homes. When our enemies realized that we had been warned and that God had upset their plan, we all went back, each to our own task at the wall. From that time on, however, only half my workforce took a hand in the work, while the other half, armed with spears, bucklers, bows, and breastplates, stood guard behind the whole house of Judah as they rebuilt the wall. The load carriers, too, were armed. Each worked with one hand and held a weapon with the other. Every builder, while working, had a sword tied at his side. A trumpeter stood beside me, for I had said to the nobles, the magistrates, and the rest of the people, "Our work is scattered and extensive, and we are widely separated from one another along the wall. Wherever you hear the trumpet sound, join us there. Our God will fight with us." Thus we went on with the work, half with spears in hand, from daybreak till the stars came out. At the same time, I told the people to spend the nights inside Jerusalem, each with an attendant, so that they might serve as a guard by night and a working force by the day. Neither I, nor my kindred, nor any of my attendants, nor any of the bodyguard that accompanied me, took off our clothes. Everyone kept a weapon at hand. Nehemiah Chapter 5. Social and economic problems. Then there rose a great outcry of the people and their wives against certain of their Jewish kindred. Some said, "We are forced upon our sons and daughters in order to get grain to eat, that we may live." Others said, "We are forced upon our fields, our vineyards, and our houses, that we may have grain during the famine." Still others said, "To pay the king's tax. We have borrowed money on our fields and vineyards, and though these are our own kindred and our children are as good as theirs, we have had to reduce our sons and our daughters to slavery, and violence has been done to some of our daughters. Yet we do nothing about it, for our fields and our vineyards belong to others." I was extremely angry when I heard the reasons for their complaint. After some deliberation, I called the nobles and magistrates to account, saying to them, "You are exacting interest from your own kindred." I then rebuked them severely, saying to them, "As far as we were able, we brought back our Jewish kindred, who had been sold to Gentiles. You, however, are selling your own kindred to have them brought back by us." They remained silent, for they could find no answer. I continued, What you are doing is not good. Should you not conduct yourselves out of fear of our God rather than fear of the reproach of Gentile enemies? I myself, my kindred, and my attendants have lent the people money and grain without charge. Let us put an end to this usury. Return to them this very day their fields, vineyards, olive groves, and houses, together with the interest on the money, the grain, the wine, and the oil that you have lent them." They answered, "We will return everything and exact nothing further from them. We will do just what you ask." Then I called for the priests to administer an oath to them, that they would do as they had promised. I shook out the folds of my garment, saying, "Thus may God shake from home and fortune every man who fails to keep his promise, And may he thus be shaken out and emptied. And the whole assembly answered, Amen, and praised the Lord. Then the people did as they had promised. Nehemiah's record. Moreover, from the time that King Artaxerxes appointed me governor in this land of Judah, from his 20th to his 32nd year, during these 12 years, neither I nor my kindred lived off the governor's food allowance. The earlier governors, my predecessors, had laid a heavy burden on the people, taking from them each day 40 silver shekels for their food. Then, too, their attendants oppressed the people. But I, because I feared God, did not do this. In addition, though I had acquired no land of my own, I did my part in this work on the wall. And all my attendants were gathered there for all their work. Though I set my table for 150 persons, Jews and magistrates as well as the neighboring Gentiles who came to us, and though the daily preparations were made at my expense, 1 ox, 6 choice sheep, poultry, besides all kinds of wine in abundance every 10 days, despite this, I did not claim the governor's allowance, for the labor lay heavy upon this people. Keep it in mind, my God, to my credit, all that I did for this people. Nehemiah Chapter 6, plots against Nehemiah. When it had been reported to Sanballat, Tobiah, Gershom, then Arab, and our other enemies, that I had rebuilt the wall, and that there was no breach left in it, though up to the time I had not yet set up the doors in the gate, Sanballat and Gershom sent me this message, Come, let us hold counsel together at the Shepharim, in the plain of Ono. They were planning to do me harm. I sent messengers to them with this reply, I am engaged in a great enterprise, and I am unable to come down. Why should the work stop while I leave it to come down to you? 4 times they sent me this same proposal, and each time I gave the same reply. Then the 5th time Sanballat sent me the same message by one of his servants, who bore an unsealed letter containing this text. Among the nations it has been reported, Gashmu is witness to this, that you and the Jews are planning a rebellion, that for this reason you are rebuilding the walls, and that you are to be their king. Also, that you have set up prophets in Jerusalem to proclaim you king of Judah. Now, since matters like these will reach the ear of the king, come, let us hold counsel together. I sent him this answer, Nothing of what you report is happening. Rather, it is in the invention of your own mind. They were all trying to intimidate us, thinking they will be discouraged from continuing with the work, and it will never be completed. But instead, I then redoubled my efforts. I went to the house of Shemaiah, son of Deliah, son of Mahalalel, who was confined to his house, and he said, Let us meet in the house of God inside the temple building. Let us lock the doors to the temple, for they are coming to kill you. By night they are coming to kill you. My answer was, A man like me take flight? Should a man like me into the temple to save his life? I will not go, for on consideration it was plain to me that God had not sent him, rather because Tobiah and Sanballat had bribed him. He voiced this prophecy concerning me, that I might act it out of fear and commit this sin. Then they would, Those pens don't work real well with the Bible. Then they would have a shameful story with which to discredit me. Keep in mind Tobiah and Sanballat, my God, because of these things they did. Keep in mind as well as Noadiah, the woman prophet, and the other prophets who were trying to intimidate me. Completion of the work. The wall was finished on the 25th day of Elul. The work had taken 52 days. When all other enemies had heard of this, and all of the neighbors and all of the neighboring Gentiles round about had taken note of it, they were very discouraged, for they knew that it was with our God's help that this work had been completed. At that same time, however, many leaders were going to Tobiah from the nobles of Judah, and Tobiah's letters were reaching them. For many in Judah were in league with him, since he was the son-in-law of Shechaniah, son of Era, and his son Jehohanan had married the daughter of Meshullam. Hey, psst, stop it, please. Thank you. Son of Berechiah, they would praise his good deeds in my presence and relate to him whatever I said. And Tobiah sent letters trying to intimidate me. Thank you. Good girl. You got an itch somewhere? He was trying to itch it? I heard all that jingle jangle. Nehemiah Chapters 7. Now that the wall had been rebuilt, I had the doors set up, and the gatekeepers, the singers, and the Levites were put in charge of them. Over Jerusalem I placed Hanani, my brother, and Hananiah, the commander of the citadel, who was more untrustworthy and God-fearing than most. I said to them, the gates of Jerusalem are not to be opened until the sun is hot, and while the sun is still shining, they shall shut and bar the doors. Appoint as sentinels the inhabitants of Jerusalem, some at their watch posts and others in front of their own houses. Census of the province. Now the city was quite wide and spacious, but its population was small and none of the houses had been rebuilt. When my God had inspired me to gather together the nobles, the magistrates, and the people and to examine their family records, I came upon the family list of those who had returned to the earliest period. There I had found the following written. These are the inhabitants of the province who returned from the captivity of the exiles, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away, and who came back to Jerusalem and Judah, to their own cities. They returned with Zerubbabel, Jeshua, Nehemiah, Azariah, Rehemiah, Nahamani, Mordecai, Bilshan, Mispereth, Bigvai, Nahum, and Baana. The census of the people of Israel, the descendants of Parash, 2,172. The descendants of Shephatiah, 372. The descendants of Era, 652. The descendants of Path Moab, who were descendants of Jeshua and Job, 2,818. The descendants of Elam, 1,254. The descendants of Zatu, 845. The descendants of Zakai, 760. The descendants of Binui, 648. The descendants of Babai, 628. The descendants of Azgad, 2,322. The descendants of Adonakam, 667. The descendants of Bigvai, 2,067. Descendants of Aden, 655. Descendants of Ader, who were descendants of Hezekiah, 98. Descendants of Hashum, 328. Descendants of Batai, 324. Descendants of Harif, 112. Descendants of Gibeon, 95. The people of Bethlehem and Notifiah, 188. People of Anathoth, 128. The people of Beth Asmaveth, 42. People of Kiriath Jearim, Shephariah, and Beeroth, 743. People of Ramah and Geba, 621. People of Michmas, 122. The people of Bethel and Ai, 123. The people of Nebo, 52. Descendants of the other Elam, 1,254. The descendants of Harim, 320. The descendants of Jericho, 345. The descendants of Lod, Hadid, and Ono, 721. Descendants of Sanaiah, 3,930. The priests, descendants of Jediah of the house of Jeshua, 973. Descendants of Immer, 1,052. Descendants of Pashur, 1,247. Descendants of Harim, 1,017. The Levites, descendants of Jeshua, Kadmiel, of the descendants of Hodaviah, 74. The singers, descendants of Asaph, 148. Hi, baby. Hi, honey girl. The gatekeepers, descendants of Shalom, descendants of Ader, descendants of Talmon, descendants of Akub, descendants of Hatita, descendants of Shabai, 138. The temple servants, descendants of Ziha, descendants of Hashupha, descendants of Tabaoth, descendants of Kiros, descendants of Sia, descendants of Padan, descendants of Lebanon, descendants of Hagaba, descendants of Shalmai, descendants of Hanan, descendants of Gidel, descendants of Gehar, descendants of Keiah, descendants of Rezin, descendants of Nakoda, descendants of Gassam, descendants of Usa, descendants of Paseah, descendants of Basai, descendants of the Mennonites, descendants of the Nephusites, descendants of Bakbuk, descendants of Hakufa, descendants of Harhur, descendants of Baslith, descendants of Meahida, descendants of Harsha, descendants of Barkos, descendants of Sisera, descendants of Tamah, descendants of Netsiah, descendants of Hatipha, descendants of Solomon's servants, descendants of Sotai, descendants of Sophereth, descendants of Perida, descendants of Jaala, descendants of Darkon, descendants of Gidel, descendants of Shephatiah, descendants of Hatil, descendants of Poshereth, Hasabaim, descendants of Ammon. The total of the temple servants and the descendants of Solomon's servants was 392. The following who returned from Tel Milah, Tel Harsha, Sherab, Aden, and Emir were unable to prove that their ancestral houses and their descendants were Israelite, descendants of Deliah, descendants of Tobiah, descendants of Nakoda, 642. Also of the priests, descendants of Hobiah, descendants of Hakos, descendants of Barzillai. He had married one of the daughters of Barzillai the Gileadite and was named after him. These men searched their family records, but their names could not be found written there. Hence, they were disqualified from the priesthood, and the governor ordered them not to partake of the most holy foods until there should be a priest to consult the Urim and Thummim. The entire assembly taken together came to 42,360, not counting their male and female servants, who were 7,337. They also had 200 male and female singers. Their horses were 736. Their mules, 245. Their camels, 435. Their donkeys, 6,720. Certain of the heads of ancestral houses contributed to the temple service. The governor put into the treasury 1,000 drachmas of gold, 50 basins, 30 vestments for priests, and 500 minas of silver. Some of the heads of the ancestral houses contributed to the treasury for the temple service 20,000 drachmas of gold and 2,200 minas of silver. The contributions of the rest of the people amounted to 20,000 drachmas of gold, 2,000 minas of silver, and 67 vestments for priests. The priests, the Levites, and the gatekeepers, the singers, the temple servants, and all of Israel took up residence in their cities. Promulgation of the law, Nehemiah Chapter 8, Ezra reads the law. Now, when the 7th month came, the whole people gathered as one in the square in front of the water gate, as they called upon Ezra the scribe to bring forth the book of the law of Moses, which the Lord has commanded for Israel. On the first day of the 7th month, therefore, Ezra the priest brought the law before the assembly, which consisted of men, women, and those children old enough to understand. In the square in front of the water gate, Ezra read out of the book from daybreak till midday, in the presence of the men, the women, and those children old enough to understand. And all the people listened attentively to the book of the law. Ezra the scribe stood on a wooden platform that had been made for the occasion. At his right side stood Mattithiah, Shema, Ananiah, Pedaiah, Mishael, Mishiah, Hashum, Hashbaddanah, Zechariah, Meshullam. Ezra opened the scroll so that all the people might see it, for he was standing higher than any of the people. When he opened it, all of the people stood. Ezra blessed the Lord, the great God, and all of the people, in their hands raised high, answered, Amen, Amen. Then they knelt down and bowed before the Lord, their faces to the ground. The Levites, Jeshua, Bani, Sherebiah, Yamin, Akub, Shabbatai, Hodiah, Maaseiah, Kelida, Azariah, Jozabad, Hanan, and Peliah explained the law to the people who remained in their places. Ezra read clearly from the book of the law of God, interpreting it so that all could understand what was read. Then Nehemiah, that is, the governor, and Ezra, the priest, scribe, and the Levites, who were instructing the people, said to all the people, "Today is holy to the Lord your God. Do not lament, do not weep," for all the people were weeping as they heard the words of the law. He continued, "Go eat rich foods and drink sweet drinks, and allot portions to those who had nothing prepared. For today is holy to our Lord. Do not be saddened this day, for rejoicing in the Lord is your strength." And the Levites quieted all the people, saying, "Silence, today is holy, do not be saddened." Then all the people began to eat and drink, distribute portions, to celebrate with great joy, for they understood the words that had been explained to them. The Feast of Booths. On the second day, the heads of ancestral houses of the whole people, and also the priests and the Levites, gathered around Ezra the scribe to study the words of the law. They found written in the law, commanded by the Lord through Moses, that the Israelites should dwell in booths during the feast of the 7th month, and that they should have this proclamation made throughout their cities and in Jerusalem. Go out to the hill country and bring in branches of olive, oleaster, myrtle, palm, and other trees in leaf to make booths, as it is written. The people went out and brought in branches with which they had made booths for themselves, on the roof of their houses, in the courtyards, in the courts of the house of God, and in the squares of the water gate and the gate of Ephraim. So the entire assembly of the returned exiles made booths and dwelt in them. Now the Israelites had done nothing of this sort from the days of Jeshua son of Nun until this occasion. Therefore there was very great joy. Ezra read from the book of the law of God day after day, from the first day to the last. They kept the feast for 7 days and the solemn assembly on the 8th day, as was required. Nehemiah Chapter 9, Public Confession of Sin. On the 24th day of this month, the Israelites gathered together while fasting and wearing sackcloth, their heads covered with dust. Those of Israelite descent separated themselves from all of who were on foreign extraction. They stood forward and confessed their sins and the guilty deeds of their ancestors. When they had taken their places, they read from the book of the law. They read from the book of the law of the Lord their God for a fourth of the day, and during another fourth they made their confession and bowed down before the Lord their God. Standing on the platform of the Levites were Jeshua, Ben-Ui, Kadmiel, Shebaniah, Bunai, Sherebiah, Bani, and Shanani, who cried out to the Lord their God with a loud voice. The Levites, Jeshua, Kadmiel, Bani, Hashabaniah, Sherebiah, Hodiah, Shebaniah, and Pethahiah said, "Arise, bless the Lord your God from eternity to eternity, and may they bless your glorious name, which is exalted above all blessing and praise. You are the Lord, you alone. You made the heavens, the highest heavens, and all their hosts, the earth and all that is upon it, the seas and all that is in them. To all of them you give life. The heavenly hosts bow down before you. You are the Lord God, who chose Abram, who brought him from Ur of the Chaldees, who named him Abraham. You found his heart faithful in your sight. You made the covenant with him to give the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Jebusites, and Girgashites. You fulfilled to him and his descendants. You fulfilled your promises, for you are just. You saw the affliction of our ancestors in Egypt. You heard their cry by the Red Sea. You worked signs and wonders against Pharaoh, against all his servants and the people of his land, because you knew of their insolence toward them. Thus you made for yourselves a name even to this day. The sea divided before them on dry ground. They passed through the midst of the sea. The pursuers you hurled into the depths like a stone into the mighty waters. With a column of cloud you led them by day, and by night with a column of fire to light the way of their journey. the way in which they must travel. On Mount Sinai you came down. You spoke with them from heaven. You gave them their just ordinances, true laws, good statutes, and commandments. Your holy Sabbath you made known to them. Commandments, statutes, and law you prescribed for them. By the hand of Moses, your servant, food from heaven you gave them in their hunger. Water from a rock you sent them in their thirst. You told them to enter and occupy the land, which you had sworn to give them. But they, our ancestors, proved to be insolent. They were obdurate and did not obey your commandments. They refused to obey and no longer remembered the wonders you had worked for them. They were obdurate and appointed a leader in order to return to their slavery in Egypt. But you are forgiving, God, gracious and merciful, slow to anger and rich in mercy. You do not forsake them. Though they made for themselves a molten calf and proclaimed, "Here is your God who brought you up from Egypt," and were guilty of great insults. Yet in your great mercy you did not forsake them in the desert. By day the column of cloud did not cease, did not cease to lead them on their journey. By night the column of fire did not cease to light the way they were to travel. Your good spirit you bestowed on them to give them understanding. Your manna you did not withhold from their mouths, and you gave them water in their thirst. 40 years in the desert you sustained them. They did not want, their garments did not become worn, and their feet did not swell. You gave them kingdoms and peoples, which you divided among them as borderlands. They possessed the land of Sihon, king of Heshbon, and the land of Og, king of Bashan. You made their children as numerous as the stars of the heavens, and you brought them into the land which you had commanded their ancestors to enter and possess. The children went in to possess the land you humbled before them, the Canaanite inhabitants, and gave them into their power, their kings and their peoples of the land, to do with them as they wished. They captured fortified cities and fertile land, and they took possession of houses filled with all good things, cisterns already dug, vineyards, olive groves, and fruit trees in abundance. They ate and had their fill, fattened and feasted on your great goodness, but they were contemptuous and rebelled against you. They cast your law behind their back. They murdered your prophets, who bore witness against them to bring them back to you. They were guilty of great insults. Therefore you gave them into the power of their enemies, who oppressed them. But in that time of their oppression they would cry out to you, and you would hear them from heaven, and according to your great mercy give them saviors, to deliver them from the power of their enemies. As soon as they had relief, they would go back to doing evil in your sight. Again you abandoned them to the power of their enemies, who crushed them. Once again they cried out to you, and you heard them from heaven, and delivered them according to your mercy many times over. You bore witness against them to bring them back to your law, but they were insolent and would not obey your commandments. They sinned against your ordinances, which gave life to those who kept them. They turned stubborn back, stiff in their neck, and would not obey. You are patient with them for many years, bearing witness against them through your Spirit by means of your prophets. Still, they would not listen. Therefore you delivered them into the power of the peoples of the lands. Yet in your great mercy you did not completely destroy them, and did not forsake them, for you are a gracious and merciful God. Now our God, great and mighty, awesome God, who preserves the covenant of mercy, do not discount all the hardship that has befallen us, our kings, our princes, our priests, our prophets and ancestors, and your entire people from the time of the kings of Assyria until this day. In all that has come upon us, you have been just, for you kept faith while we have done evil. Yes, our kings, our princes, our priests, and our ancestors have not kept your law. They paid no attention to your commandments and the warnings which you gave them, while they were still in their kingdom, in the midst of the many good things that you had given them, and on the wide fertile land that you had spread out before them. They did not serve you, nor turn away from their evil deeds. Today we are slaves, as for the land which you gave our ancestors, that they might eat its fruits and good things. See, we have become slaves upon it. Its rich produce goes to the kings. You set over us because of our sins, who rule over our bodies and our cattle as they please. We are in great distress. Nehemiah Chapter 10. Signatories of the pact. In view of all of this, we are entering into a firm pact which we are putting into writing. On this sealed document appear the names of our princes, our Levites, and our priests. On the sealed document, the governor Nehemiah son of Hakaliah, and Zedekiah, Seraiah, Azariah, Jeremiah, Pashhur, Amariah, Melchijah, Hattush, Shebaniah, Maluk, Harim, Meremoth, Obadiah, Daniel, Jenathan, Baruch, Meshullam, Abijah, Mijamin, Maathiah, Bilgai, Shemaiah. These are the priests. The Levites, Jeshua, son of Atzaniah, Benui, of the descendants of Hanadad, Kadmiel, and their kinsmen, Shabaniah, Hodiah, Kelida, Peliah, Hanan, Micah, Rehob, Hashabiah, Zakur, Sherebiah, Shebaniah, Hodiah, Bani, and Benui, and Beninu. The leaders of the people, Parath, Moab, Elam, Zatu, Bani, Bani, Hagdad, Babai, Adonijah, Bigvai, Adin, Atir, Hezekiah, Atur, Hodiah, Hashun, Batsai, Shalom, Harif, Anathoth, Nabai, Makpiash, Milshalom, Kitzer, Misham-Zabel, Zadok, Jadua, Pelatiah, Hanan, Ananiah, Hosea, Hananiah, Hashub, Halhohesh, Pilhashobek, Rehun, Hashabna, Maaseiah, Ahiah, Hanan, Anan, Miluk, Harim, Baanath. Provisions of the pact, the rest of the people, priests, Levites, gatekeepers, singers, temple servants, and all the others who had separated themselves from the local inhabitants in favor of the law of God, was their wives, their sons, their daughters, and all who are of the age of discretion. Join their influential kindred, and with me the sanction of the curse. Take this oath to follow the law of God, given through Moses, the servant of God, and to observe carefully all the commandments of the Lord, our God, his ordinances and his statutes. We will not marry our daughters to the local inhabitants, and we will not accept their daughters for our sons. When the local inhabitants bring in merchandise of any kind or grain for sale on the Sabbath day, we will not buy from them on the Sabbath or on any other holy day in the 7th year. We will forego the produce and forgive every kind of debt. We impose these commandments on ourselves to give us 1/3 of a shekel each year for the service of the house of our God, for the showbread, the daily grain offering, the daily burnt offering, and for the Sabbaths, new moons, and festivals, for the holy offerings and sin offerings, to make atonement for Israel for every service of the house of God. We priests, Levites, and people have determined by lot concerning the procurement of wood it is to be brought to the house of our God by each of our ancestral houses in stated times each year to be burnt on the altar of the Lord our God. As the law prescribes, we have agreed to bring each year to the house of the Lord the first fruits of the fields and of our fruit trees, of every kind also in the prescribed in the law, to bring to the house of our God, to the priests who serve in the house of our God, the firstborn of our children and our animals, including the firstborn of our flocks and herds, the first batch of our dough and our offerings of the fruit of every tree and wine and oil. We will bring the priests into the chambers of the house of our God. The tithe of our fields we will bring to the Levites. They, the Levites, shall take the tithe in all the cities of the service. An Aaronite priest shall be with the Levites when they take the tithe, and the Levites shall bring the tithe of the tithes to the house of our God, to the chambers of the treasury. For to these chambers the Israelites and Levites bring the offerings of grain, wine, and oil. There also are housed the vessels of the sanctuary and the ministering priests, the gatekeepers and the singers. We will not neglect the house of our God. 3. Dedication of the wall and other reforms. Nehemiah Chapter 11. Resettlement of Jerusalem. The administrators took up residence in Jerusalem, and the rest of the people cast lots to bring one man in 10 to reside in Jerusalem, the holy city, where the other 9 would remain in the other cities. The people blessed all those who willingly agreed to take up residence in Jerusalem. These are the heads of the province who took up residence in Jerusalem. In the cities of Judah dwelt Israelites, priests, Levites, temple servants, and the descendants of Solomon's servants, each on the property they owned in their own cities. In Jerusalem dwelt both Judahites and Benjamites. Of the Judahites, Athaliah, son of Uzziah, son of Zechariah, son of Amariah, son of Shephatiah, son of Mahalalel. Of the sons of Perez, Maaseiah, son of Baruch, son of Kolhoseh, son of Hoseiah, son of Adiah, son of Joiarib, son of Zechariah, a son of the Shelonites. The total of the descendants of Perez, who dwelt in Jerusalem, was 468 people of substance. These were the Benjamites: Solu, son of Meshullam, son of Joed, son of Badiah, son of Kaliah, son of Maaseiah, son of Ithiel, son of Jeshiah, and his kinsmen warriors 928 in number. Joel, son of Zechariah, was their commander, and Judah, son of Hasenuah, was second in command of the city. Among the priests were Jediah, Joiarib, Jeshin, Sariah, son of Hilkiah, son of Meshullam, son of Zadok, son of Marioth, son of Ahitub, the ruler of the house of God, and their kinsmen who carried out the temple service, 822. Adiah, son of Jehoram, son of Pelaliah, son of Umsi, son of Zechariah, son of Pashur, son of Melchijah, and his kinsmen, heads of ancestral houses, 242, and Amasai, son of Atzariel, son of Atzai, son of Mishilemoth, son of Immer, and his kinsmen, warriors 128. Their commander was Zebdiel, son of Haggadal. Among the Levites were Shemaiah, son of Hashub, son of Asrikam, son of Hashabiah, son of Bunai, Shabbathai, and Josabad, Levitical priests who were placed over the external affairs of the house of God. Mattaniah, son of Micah, son of Zabdi, son of Asaph, director of the Psalms, who led the thanksgiving and prayer. Bukiah, second in rank among his kinsmen, and Abda, son of Shammua, son of Galal, son of Jeduthun. The total of the Levites in the holy city was 284. The gatekeepers were Aktub, Talmon, and their kinsmen, who kept watch over the gates, 172 in number. The rest of Israel, including priests and Levites, were in all the other cities of Judah in their own inheritances. The temple servants lived in Ophel, Zihah, and Gishpa, were in charge of the temple servants. The prefect of the Levites in Jerusalem was Utsai, son of Bani, son of Hashabiah, son of Mattaniah, son of Micah. He was one of the descendants of Asaph, the singers appointed to the service of the house of God. For they had been appointed by royal decree, and there was a fixed schedule for the singers, assigning them their daily duties. Pethahiah, son of Meshezabel, a descendant of Zerah, son of Judah, was royal deputy in all the affairs that concerned the people. Other settlements, as concerns their villages with their fields, Judahites lived in Kiriath Arba, and its dependencies in Dibon, and its dependencies in Jekbaziel, and its villages in Jeshua, Moleda, Beth Peleh, in Hazar Shual, in Beersheba, and its dependencies in Ziklag, in Mechonah, and its dependencies in En Rimmon, Zorah, Jarmuth, Zanoah, Adulam, and their villages, Lachish, and its fields, Aseka, and its dependencies. They were settled from Beersheba to Gehinnom. Benjaminites were in Geba, Mishmash, Asia, Bethel and its dependencies, Anathoth, Nob, Ananiah, Hazer, Ramah, Gittaim, Hadid, Zobim, Nabaleh, Lod, and Ono, and the valley of the artisans. Some divisions of the Levites from Judah were attached to Benjamin. Nehemiah Chapter 12, Priests and Levites at the time of the Zerubbabel. The following are the priests and the Levites who returned with Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua, Sariah, Jeremiah, Ezra, and Amariah, Meluk, Hattush, Shechaniah, Rehum, Miramoth, Idu, Ginnathon, Abijah, Mishamin, Madiah, Bilgah, Shemaiah, and Joiarib, Jediah, Salu, Amek, Hilkiah, Jediah. These were the priestly heads and their kinsmen in the days of Jeshua. Excuse me. The Levites were Jeshua, Binnui, Kadmiel, Sherebiah, Judah, Mattaniah, who together with his kinsmen was in charge of the thanksgiving hymns, while Bakbukiah had Unno and their kinsmen ministered opposite them by turns. High priest Jeshua became the father of Joachim, Joachim the father of Eliashib, and Eliashib the father of Jehoiada, Jehoiada the father of Johanan, and Johanan the father of Jadua. Priests and Levites under Joachim. In the days of Joachim, there were the priestly family heads: the Sariah, Moriah, for Jeremoth, Hananiah, for Ezra, Meshullam, for Amariah, Jehohanan, for Malushi, Jonathan, for Shebaniah, Joseph, for Harim, Adnah, for Meremoth, Hilkai, for Idu, Zechariah, for Jenathon, Meshullam, for Abijah, Zikri, for Miamin, for Moadiah, Piltai, for Bilgah, Shammua, for Shemaiah, Jonathan, and for Joharib, Mattanai, for Jediah, Utsai, for Salu, Kalai, for Amok, Eber, for Hilkiah, Hashbabiah, for Jediah, Nathanael. In the time of Eliashib, Jehoiada, Johanan, and Jadua, the heads of ancestral houses of the priests, were written down in the book of the Chronicles up until the reign of Darius the Persian. The sons of Levi, the family heads, were written down in the book of Chronicles up until the time of Johanan, the son of Eliashib. The heads of the Levites were Hashabiah, Sherebiah, Jeshua, Binnui, Kadmiel. Their kinsmen who stood opposite them to sing praises and thanksgiving in fulfillment of the command of David, the man of God, one section opposite the other, were Mattaniah, Bakbukiah, Obadiah, Meshullam, Talman, and Akub were gatekeepers. They guarded the storerooms at the gates. All these lived in the time of Joachim, son of Yeshua, son of Josadak, and in the time of Nehemiah the governor, and of Ezra the priest scribe. Dedication of the wall. At the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem, the Levites were sought out wherever they lived and were brought to Jerusalem to celebrate a joyful dedication with thanksgiving hymns and the music of cymbals, harps, and lyres. The Levitical singers gathered together from the region about Jerusalem, from the villages of the Netophahites, that Beth Gilgal, and from the plains of Jeba and Asmaveth, for the singers had built themselves settlements about Jerusalem. The priests and Levites first purified themselves. Then they purified the people, the gates, and the wall. I had the administrators of Judah go up on the wall, and I arranged 2 great choirs. The first of these proceeded to the right along to the top of the wall, in the direction of the dung gate, followed by Hoshea, and half the administrators of Judah, along with Azariah, Ezra, Meshullam, Judah, Benjamin, Shemaiah, Jeremiah, priests with the trumpets, and also Zechariah, son of Jonathan, son of Shemaiah, son of Mattaniah, son of Micaiah, son of Zakur, son of Asaph, and his kinsman Shemaiah, Atzarel, Milali, excuse me, Gilali, Mai, Nathaniel, Judah, and Hanani. With the musical instruments of David, the man of God, Ezra the scribe, was at their head. At the fountain gate, they were straight up by the steps of the city of David, and continued along the top of the wall above the house of David until they came to the water gate on the east. The second choir proceeded to the left, followed by myself and the other half of the administrators. Along the top of the wall, past the oven tower, as far as the broad wall, then past the Ephraim gate to the Mishneh gate, the fish gate, the tower of Hananel, and the 100 tower, as far as the sheep gate. They came to a halt in the prison gate. Both choirs took up a position in the house of God. I too, and half the magistrates with me, together with the priests, Eliakim, Maaseiah, Benjamin, Micaiah, Elionai, Zechariah, Hananiah with the trumpets, and Maaseiah, Shemaiah, Eleazar, Utsai, Johanan, Melchijah, Elam, and Etzer. The singers were heard under the leadership of Jezrahiah. Great sacrifices were offered on that day, and they rejoiced, for God had given them cause for great rejoicing. The women and the children joined in, and the rejoicing of Jerusalem could be heard from far off. At that time men were appointed over the chambers set aside for stores, offerings, first fruits, and tithes. In them there were to collect from the fields of the various cities the portions legally assigned to the priests and Levites, for Judah rejoiced in its appointed priests and Levites, who carried out the ministry of their God, and the ministry of purification, as did the singers and the gatekeepers, for accordance with the prescriptions of David and Solomon his son. For in the days of David and Asaph long ago, there were leaders of singers for songs of praise and thanksgiving to God. And all of Israel in the days of Zerubbabel and in the days of Nehemiah gave the singers and their gatekeepers their portions according to their daily needs. They made their consecrated offerings to the Levites, and the Levites made theirs to the descendants of Aaron. Nehemiah chapter 13. At that time, when the book of Moses was being read in the hearing of the people, it was found written there, no Ammonite or Moabite may ever be admitted into the assembly of God, for they did not meet the Israelites with food and water, but they hired Balaam to curse them though our God turned the curse into a blessing. When they had heard the law, they separated all of those mixed in descent from Israel, reforming the temple. Before this, the priest Eliashib, who had been placed in charge of the chambers of the house of our God, and who was an associate of Tobiah, had set aside for the latter's use a large chamber in which had previously been stored the grain offerings, incense and vessels, the tithes in grain, wine, and oil allotted to Levites, singers, and gatekeepers, and the offerings due to the priests. During all this time I had not been in Jerusalem, for in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes, king of Babylon, I had gone back to the king after a suitable period of time. However, I asked leave of the king, and returned to Jerusalem, where I discovered the evil thing that Eliashib had done to Tobiah, in setting aside for him a chamber in the courts of the house of God. They displeased me very much, so I had all of Tobiah's household goods thrown outside the chamber. Then I gave orders to purify the chambers, and I brought back the vessels of the house of God, the grain offerings, and the incense. I learned, too, that the portions due to the Levites were no longer being given, so that the Levites and the singers, who should have been carrying out the services, had deserted to their own fields. I reprimanded the magistrates, demanding, "Why is the house of God neglected?" Then I brought the Levites together and had them resume their stations. All Judah once more brought the tithes of grain, wine, and oil to the storerooms. In charge of the storerooms I appointed Shelemiah, the priest, Zadok, the scribe, and Pedaiah, one of the Levites, together with Hanan, son of Zakur, son of Mattaniah, at their assistant, for they were considered trustworthy. It was their duty to make the distribution to their kinsmen. Remember, this is my credit, my God. Do not forget the good deeds I have done for the house of my God and its services. Sabbath observance. In those days, I perceived that people in Judah were treading the wine presses on the Sabbath, that they were bringing in sheaves of grain, loading them on their donkeys together with wine, grapes, figs, and every other kind of load, and bringing them to Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. I warned them to sell none of these provisions. In Jerusalem itself, the Tyrians residing there were importing fish and every other kind of merchandise and selling it to the Judahites on the Sabbath. I reprimanded the nobles of Judah, demanding, "What is this evil thing you are doing, profaning the Sabbath day? Did not your ancestors act in the same way, with the result that our God has brought all this evil upon us and upon the city? Would you add to the wrath against Israel by once more profaning the Sabbath?" When the shadows were falling on the gates of Jerusalem before the Sabbath, I ordered the doors to be closed and prohibited their reopening until after the Sabbath. I posted some of my own people at the gates, so that no load might enter on the Sabbath day. The merchants and sellers of various kinds of merchandise spent that night once or twice outside Jerusalem. But then I warned them, "Why do you spend the night alongside the wall? If you keep this up, I will beat you." From that time on, they did not return on the Sabbath. Then I ordered the Levites to purify themselves and to watch the gates, so that the Sabbath day might be kept holy. This too, remember in my favor, my God, and have mercy on me in accordance with your great mercy. Mixed marriages. Also in those days I saw Jews who had married women of Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. Of their children, half spoke the language of Ashdod, or of one of the other peoples, and none of them knew how to speak the languages of Judah. So I reprimanded and cursed them. I beat some of their men and pulled out their hair, and I adjured them, by God, you shall not marry your daughters to their sons, nor accept any of their daughters for your sons, or for yourselves. Did not Solomon the king of Israel sin because of them? Though among the many nations there was no king like him, and though he was beloved of his God, and God had made him king over all Israel, yet even he was led into sin by foreign women. Must it also be heard of you that you have done this same terrible thing, betraying our God by marrying foreign women? One of the sons of Jehoiada, son of Eliashib the high priest, was the son-in-law of Sanballat the Horonite. I drove him from my presence. Remember against them, my God, how they defiled the priesthood and the covenant of the priesthood and the Levites. So I cleansed them of all the foreign contamination. I established the various functions for the priests and Levites so that each had an appointed task. I also provided for the procurement of wood at stated times and for the first fruits. Remember, this is my favor, my God. God bless you.